And so it's our job to make sure that we're telling the story, but not being part of the story ourselves.
But at the same time being like integral to the story, like working it in, because there's a lot of fonts out there and lettering out there. Each artist has its own like brush strokes and elements that if you look at their line work, it's going to lean towards certain fonts that you choose to use. Same with color choices for like maybe captions. I try to work as much within the art to match the art, and that's not something that I did in the beginning when I started out. So if there's any new letterers out there, when I started out, I used basically like the same font for everything. It was just like, oh, that's my style, that's my font, or whatever. I didn't realize it, but now when I look back at my old work, I'm like, that font does not work at all. That balloon shape doesn't work at all. That color doesn't work at all. And if I was to revisit these projects today, they would look completely different than how I approached the design in the first place.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's about really complementing the art as much as possible and being really not visible as much as possible. I like to say that letterers are the 99% invisible in the industry. You only notice us when we're really bad. So,
or when we make a smile.
Absolutely.
Okay, so based on that, how do you, as a letterer, identify a style to help shape the tone?
Sometimes it kind of gets dictated to us, so you'll have editors that are a little more in the know, or you'll have an artist that already has a strong feeling or an opinion on something. And so you really want to try to take that information and use it as much as possible. When being left up to your own devices, it's just kind of, it's how you feel. It's how I feel. You know, you put a couple fonts, you put a couple sound effects up against a few pieces of the artwork, and you let the artwork tell you what font to use. Because if you try to force something in, like Zen said, you know, not every font is appropriate for every book. So if you try to fit that square peg into a round hole, it's just not going to look right. And it's a feeling, you know, it's a feeling.
I don't have too much to add to that.
This past December, I was lucky enough to have gotten some contract work with the Business Insider, and they had me do 3 pieces for them. They were journalistic style webcomics, and each style was so different from the last, dealing with 3 different artists, and each artist came from such a strong design background that they had these distinct styles, and it was really challenging, but as mentioned previously, once you start feeling the art and breathing the art and hopefully interpreting what the artist and the storyteller is putting down, the font choice kind of dictates itself. And yeah, if any of you letterers out there fall into a style like Zen was saying, just using one particular font constantly, or really leaning on a certain font, because maybe you've seen other fonts like that that look like that, or similar to that font family in the mainstream comics. There are so many different fonts out there, and so many different fonts have a different voice, and so experiment with them, and don't be hasty when you choose your font.
I'm curious where your sources of fonts are. I know comic book fonts are very specific. I mean, is it all just Comic Craft and Blindbot, or are there other places?
Those are my 2.
You know, I'm interested in working with an indie publisher. What are some of the conventions and challenges that a letterer should be aware of? Go ahead.
So, well, for me, I usually do American style comic books. So there's a big, market for manga letterers out there. I've tried it. It wasn't my thing because it was a completely different sensibility to what I'm used to working with, because everything goes the other way, and they have a lot of bigger balloons. And to me, I find that more challenging because I work with smaller balloons usually. But as far as letterers go, work is concerned, that's a pretty good start. There's a lot of companies that do like translating from English into English. That is a pretty relatively easy job to transition from doing lettering. So that's the main difference for me. It's just, if it's Western style or Eastern style, I don't really have any other styles that work.
So if I'm working on a horror title, I look for a font that may be a little more brushy looking. Horror genre tends to be just a little more gritty, a little more grimy. So you can use maybe like a more hand-drawn or an organic type looking shapes and stuff with that. You can kind of get brushy with the sound effects and stuff because, you know, some of the gore and some of the splatters and just some of the rough stuff, you can really bring out that horror element. Superhero books are a little more cleaner. You know, you'll go with a little more, your balloon will look a little more perfectly drawn or computer generated, as I say. The sound effects will be kind of sharp and blocky. And there are also some things that you can kind of play with within that as well. But again, it just kind of goes back to complementing the artwork more than you're complementing the genre, because you can have a superhero story that has a horror bend to it, right? And you may need to eschew those nice, sharp-looking sound effect fonts for something that may be a little more splattery or something that may have a few more brush strokes in it. So I just go back to complementing the story and complementing the artwork and maybe not trying to shoehorn a style into a particular book.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do too. If you would like to come up here later, I have a book that one of the publishers I work with just gave to me, and oddly enough, there is a horror piece that I'm doing in there, so you could take a look at it and I'll show you the examples that I have chosen over an earlier piece, which is a more underground kind of indie feel, and they were going for something specific. So completely two different styles, but again, it's about letting the art dictate what those voices are going to sound like, and the only thing we really have is the shapes of the letters, and the art will always tell you usually what kind of shapes you should use.
Yeah, like if you were working on a comic book that is supposed to look more like it's from like a particular age, like a Silver Age book, you know, you wouldn't necessarily want to have these perfect drawn shapes and these fonts that just look so crispy and neat. You know, a Silver Age book kind of lends itself to more of a simplified dynamic where the caption boxes may just be like a off yellow color. You know, the sound effects may be a little more simplified because you want to have that hand-drawn style. So you may not throw 30 different sound effect fonts into one book. It may just be one or two. So, you know, if there are different ages that you are trying to go for, or even like a cartoon book, if you're doing something like a Scooby-Doo or Batman the Animated Series, you may want to have something, fonts that are a little more fun, a little more bouncy, you know, something that just kind of gives the mood that, oh, hey, this is a fun book, we're going to have some fun.
You brought up two questions for me. So first one, for new artists or new writers, who is in charge of the special effects or the sound effects?
Well, that varies from the project to project, and even from panel to panel sometimes. Like, I've had books where the artist does draw sound effects, but then on another panel he doesn't. So that introduces a new challenge, because now I'm trying to match the sound effects to the ones that he's already hand-drawn in there. So on one hand, it's cool because you get a style that maybe I wouldn't have come up with, but on the other hand, it's kind of limiting for me, because sometimes it's drawn in such a way that I can't manipulate it if I need to, if I had to do anything with it.
I don't mind taking a back seat to the artist if they want to draw their own sound effects, because sometimes I think that can complement the book and complement the artwork in a way that I may not be able to. They may see something, they may have a particular style, they may have a better feel for where they want to put it in the panel, how they want it to look. I have no problems with that, because at the end of the day, I want the book to be the best that it possibly can. And if that means I have to take a step back and worry about balloon placement and other things, zero problem with that. But at the same time, like Zen said, sometimes if you have to match something that's already hand-drawn, it can be really difficult. And especially with the limited time frame that we normally have to work with it, it could be a jam sometimes. You can be really stuck with that.
Yeah, you said it right there, man. Limited time. And if someone wants to lay down a sound effect for me, for my client, hey, let them lay it down. I'm totally cool with that.
But they use like Comic Sans or like Bada Boom, if you guys know these ones, you know, it's like, oh, please don't use that. If you
You don't like Comic Sans?
That's where the upsell happens.
Sam, I didn't know you were opposed to Common Santa.
That could be a completely different panel on its own.
Okay, so what advice do you have for writers and artists in the room about, what do they need to know technically about working with a letterer? How can they make your job easier from the get-go?
Writers and artists should remember that not every panel has to be completely filled with composition. Sometimes it's okay to leave a little negative space for the balloons and leave a little negative space for the sound effects. I'm working over a very dynamic artist named V. Ken Marion right now. Beautiful composition. His line work is gorgeous. Zero negative space. Like everything is taken up, and so as a letterer, I feel kind of guilty because I have to choose what's going to get covered up now. And that's not something I want to do because, the more that you can work your lettering into the panel composition itself without trying to cover things, the book will benefit in general. So, over top of that, so now I have to choose, well, what's the least important thing in this panel that I could put this balloon over? Or what's the least important thing that I can put this sound effect over to where I'm not taking away from an important piece of information that is in the panel? People love to draw, and that is fantastic. Comic books wouldn't be a comic book without the gorgeous artwork inside. But sometimes it's okay to leave just that little space in there.
Yeah, so this is like my number one pet peeve right here with lettering, is that, like you said, you have every piece of that panel covered. So now we're trying to decide what the least important part of that element is. So now you're dictated to only basically one place you can put the balloon. Now if that panel was designed how it should be, maybe I shouldn't say it like that, but if it was designed in a way to accommodate the letterer, I would have a choice where in that panel I can put it, because I wouldn't necessarily put it down here if I was trying to control the flow in a certain way. I'm forced to now put it in this situation. So artists out there, this is a big thing. You gotta save yourself time. You don't want to be sitting there drawing details in a background, like spending hours, in some, going to town, and then I just pop a balloon right over it. Boom, all that work.
I spent an hour on that.
No one's gonna see it. So why not just leave the top part empty? I mean, sometimes you don't even have to draw a background in that part because we're gonna put a balloon over it. I'm not saying don't draw backgrounds. I'm just saying just leave space above the people's heads.
25%. You can just leave like 25% at the top or along the sides of the panel. I promise you, your composition won't suffer, and the book in general will be better because of it.
Definitely. Read the script and try to visualize who's speaking first, and remember that there's no motion in comics. So if someone is speaking, generally you want to go left to right with your dialogue for Western style comics. So as letterers, we need to be able to place the bubbles in a way where your eye will comfortably be navigated through the page with the art and the colors, and we're not having to cross things or do some weird, crazy loop-de-loop thing just so we could say, hey, this guy's speaking over here, and in the end, I might not be able to pull that off. It's like, hey, is his shoulder speaking? It's like, yeah, it's a speaking shoulder. It's great. After all that work.
Yes, figure placement is important.
Yes, definitely.
So,
no, go on.
So also writers then, for writers in the room and people who might see some of the video footage, same thing, you gotta think about your letter when you're writing your script. You don't wanna have these big old balloons that have 50, 60 words in it, because first of all, the balloons don't look right. I mean, the bigger it is, it just doesn't look right. So we're either having to break them up or having big, ugly balloons sitting in there. And again, your artist is going to suffer because of that, because now he's drawing and, we have to cover it up with all this dialogue. So my thing is just the less amount of dialogue, the better. And that's not just to make my life easier. I just think that comics look better and they pay you're just reading like little bits at a time. They're supposed to be snapshots. You're not supposed to sit there and just read this person's dialogue for like 20 minutes and then go to the next panel. I don't feel comics are supposed to be done.
You mentioned something about the panels, like, you know, the way it needs to flow. But then you also said something about a page. Do you just do it panel by panel, or are you considering the whole page as well?
Yes, writers and artists, you need to consider the entire page design, not necessarily just the panel design. Panel design is very important. You want to be able to guide the eye through the panel, but also the page. You want to be able to guide the eye across the page, down across, and then down across to the end of the page again, sort of like a Z formation. So one thing that I was taught was that you can take, let's say, a mainstream comic or anything and open it up and flip it upside down. See what kind of pattern that makes just for the lettering bubbles. And it should kind of stagger this way. So that's kind of what you want the reader's eye to do. So like Zen was saying, as an artist, if you can figure out a way to design your panels and your page that way, the lettering will come second nature to the letterer, which means that the whole vibe of the book will just be so cohesive and the entire thing will gel together, usually.
And I've seen some thought balloons come back recently. I've had to do those. So, you know, as lettering kind of went digital, they kind of kicked out the thought balloon in favor of captions, the internal monologues, so to speak. And I've seen some of the thought balloons coming back. So I don't know if we can raise our hands and say they're making a comeback. But you know, I think that there are some elements of analog hand lettering that are starting to find their way back into this digital workflow now. And I think it's also important as letterers, we have to realize that artificial intelligence can help us out a lot more than what it can for other artists and colorists right now, because we can kind of tell it what to do. And there's a lot of grunt work that AI can help us out with to get from script to page that speed up the process infinitely. Because for us, you have to remember that our page rates are some of the lower of the creative team. So especially here in California with what the minimum wage is, and you know, especially at some of your fast food places now, you can't take 2 and 3 hours on a page anymore. You really have to keep in mind what you're getting paid, how much time you have to do it, and pack in a super duper amount of quality with that limited time that you have. And I've been using scripts like JavaScript and some other programming language to help me out with some of the legwork, but I can see where AI can turbocharge that and make that even faster.
John Connors is so disappointed in you.
Well, so look, I mean, when you ask the AI program, hey, draw me this image of Batman, I can see where the thumbs down with that, right? Because, you know, it is artificial. But when you're asking AI, hey, can you take this script and just separate out the dialogue from everything else so I can copy paste real quick and get to work? I don't see anything wrong with that. You have to really be careful though with, you know, you don't want to upload your scripts that you get from a vendor to a third-party thing. And so I think that that's a barrier that the AI companies are going to have to overcome, because that could get us in some pretty deep doo-doo. And I wouldn't want to, you know, I wouldn't want to put a script from DC up on some third-party AI generator that, you know, could start training off of somebody else's stuff. But eventually it's going to get to a point where my computer is going to have a personal AI thing, and it is going to be working its butt off to make sure that I can letter as quickly as possible.
So he touched upon, oh, sorry, give me a second, the thought balloons versus captions. So I really don't like thought balloons. I feel like, well, that's one thing. But my other thing is just for you writers out there, it's like, I mean, I don't want to say my personal taste, but I feel like comics are kind of like movies. Like, you don't really like see someone in a movie going like, oh, I punched, I missed that person, or ow, you know, they're like reacting to things in their head. Do you react like that when you like trip and fall? Do you say in your head like, oh, I tripped and fell? You know, nobody like has this internal thought mechanism that comics have. That came out of probably a necessity back in the day when the artist didn't draw something clearly enough that they had to noodle in a thought balloon, and that just kind of became a thing. So writers out there, please use a caption. You don't use a thought balloon unless it's purposely, like you're saying, you're doing a Silver Age style book. Go to town, make the craziest looking thought balloons because you're trying to make it match that style. But I think modern comics really shouldn't have any thought balloons at all.
Todd, any thoughts on that or AI?
Sure. I got two thoughts. So first on thought balloons. I love thought balloons. But I love Silver Age and Golden Age comics, and I love creating thought balloons. I like trying to make them look as organic as possible. And
good for you.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm gonna make the AI do that.
Hey, I make Illustrator draw my balloons sometimes, so, you know.
Man,
but the thing that you can do, though,
You
is...
can draw balloons in Illustrator, and you can save those as art brushes.
Yes.
And then you can
That's-
apply that art brush to the text frame, and bam, you've got a hand-drawn balloon that you drew. And you can use for the next 50 balloons in your book if you choose to.
There we go. I like that because AI sounds a little bit complicated to me. The day I start using AI will be the day that it can cook a prime rib for me. Make my lunch for me.
Okay, I saw there were a couple questions out there. First of all, in the black sweatshirt.
Yeah, I'm curious if you could elaborate on your uses of AI. Like, obviously, you can talk about AI.
I'm assuming this isn't for Todd, right?
And you can use it, yes. Because as much as it can do sort of things that are not ethical, there's definitely an opportunity for artists to be able to use it as a tool in their arsenal and understanding kind of where not only that is happening, but how it is actually benefiting you as a creative person to do it. Yeah, I don't want to like draw this line 1,000 times, so I'm having to turn to it. Like, yeah, how does, if you talk about your process a little bit and how it's useful.
So I haven't actually tried out any of the third-party AI generators. I made the point earlier, so I use coding language, like a JavaScript. Illustrator is very code-friendly for that, and so is Microsoft Word. So I actually got into scripting when I was learning how to do find and replace for formatting scripts.
Using like macros.
Exactly. So I started out with, I need to switch 3 periods with an ellipses, or I need to switch out this hyphen for 2 hyphens. And, you could go through the script line by line and do that yourself, or you can leverage the software and use find replace. So, I ended up going down this rabbit hole of find and replace, and from there, that's when I found AppleScript. And it's a moribund language. They're not really doing a whole lot more with it these days, but every Mac kind of has this ability, and it's AppleScript is kind of the backbone of the old Automator stuff.
Yeah.
So, it is very simple, plain written code that you can go in and say, hey, find this crossbar I and change it to a lowercase I. Find this, find that. And so I discovered that, so when we are lettering and we get the manuscript from the writer, essentially all we need is like the dialogue or what's going in the caption boxes, and everything else can kind of go to the side for the moment. And so I learned how to save time by writing a script that would just go to the dialogue, copy paste it into Illustrator for me, and then as with Illustrator has progressed over the years, there are different styles, different paragraph styles, different character styles that you can use that will format your text just like that. And so if you have some templates set up, so that's the extent that I use technology. And I saw a few years ago that Adobe was testing a product where it was actually using AI to read the artwork that is on the screen, and it tried to break it down into the different panels, and it would import the script for you, and it would do the balloons for you, and it was just crazy. But I haven't seen it released since, and so I'm very slow when it comes to lettering, and lettering is a job that needs to be done quickly. Normally, when you get the assets to letter, they already made the first proof. And so I learned how to just leverage technology and leverage the app and leverage the things that are on my computer to help assist me do my job as fast as possible. Yes, it draws the balloons for me, but I tell it what shape to do. I tell it if it's looking too much of an oval shape, I tell it to blow it up just a little bit more. So, yes, it's helping me out, but it's not lettering for me. And I don't even think AI will ever be able to letter a book on its own, because as an artist, you need an artistic eye to know where you're putting the sound effect, where you are putting the word balloon. I'm sure that it'll probably style the sound effect way better than I ever could, with all sorts of glows and fills and gradients and this, that, and the other. I know where it's supposed to go. I know how it's supposed to look, and I don't know if AI will ever be able to develop that feel. Because again, it just goes back, it's a feel. It's a feel.
Go for it. Yeah.
I'm a writer and I'm new to comics. I've been working on several projects for about a year or two now. I'm going very, very carefully and slowly. And I'm asking everybody that I work with, what can I do to make it easier for you? What do you hate it when somebody does this or that? What do you need from me? And I found myself including a lot of notes under the description for the artist. Always wants to know, well, give me some facial expressions, give me some body postures, that kind of thing. Do you appreciate notes? I mean, I would always ask somebody I'm working with, do you feel that's any benefit at all? If I feel the need to put a note in there, not on every panel, but just here and there, hey, I really envisioned this. I had an idea that, there would be an effect of this voice coming in on the wind, or maybe something coming up through the smoke I had in mind. Toy with it, see what you think. And then would you give options? Do you maybe say, well, yeah, okay, I'll do the thing that this guy's asking for, but really, boom, this should look like this. So here you go, I mean, what's your
well, the only notes really that we would need is if it's specific to the lettering itself. So, if there's I had a kind of like a thought caption, and they said it was like God, you know what I mean? Like, that's a big difference of how I'm gonna approach that caption. If I just looked at the script just kind of generally real quickly, I might not have caught that detail. But really, we shouldn't be reading, we shouldn't need to read the panel descriptions as much. Technically, we should be able to just, lay out the page without the page even being there, because we want the balloons to go in a certain way. I know that might sound extreme, but we could probably do it without any of that. So the less is better for me in a script, unless it's specific. You like the sound effect, where it's coming from. Sometimes someone will put a sound effect and be like clang, but I don't know if it's his foot doing the clang or is it the door doing the clang. I need to know what it is. And also, script-wise, we do need to know what that sound effect is. Don't tell us, there's a sound effect here. As a writer, you need to write out, is it splat? Is it crack? Is it vroom? Whatever it is, you need to be specific, because we're gonna write those exact letters. Sure, we could make it up, but that's gonna change your overall book. So be specific with just what we need.
Well, yeah, I guess that kind of surprises me to hear that, because when I'm writing, I write exactly what I think that sound effect, how it should be spelled, let's say, and the source. And so that's like a no-brainer in my mind. But I mean, in terms of that I thought this might look like this or that, is just an idea. Like I gave the example of looking more, say the words coming out of some cigarette smoke formed in the shape of smoke. Maybe you think that would be more for the artists to do. But I just wonder, do in in a conservative sense, use very minimally, indications or notes from the writer. Do you? It sounds like you don't care at all for them or want to see them, but
They might have different opinions.
yeah.
Well, I'll take a different tack to that, and I'll say as long as it's clearly specified in the script in a manner that will catch my eye. I love getting feedback from the writer, because at the end of the day, I'm your voice. I am your voice on the page. And so if you have an idea, if you have a specific vision that you feel is appropriate for that page and for that panel, I want to know that, because I may have a completely different idea that may not be your idea. Now, it can kind of go a little too far, and maybe like with your example with like the words coming out like smoke, sometimes that can be a little difficult to communicate on a page, and so some of that may be a little easier for the artist to be able to do, because they can kind of draw it in and it will look better with the composition. But I want to make sure that I'm telling your story the way that you want it to be told, because again, I'm just the curator. Right? I get the words, I get the pictures, and I try to put them together in a manner that I think is going to be best for the reader. But I also have to be, I also have to keep in mind what you want as the writer, what the artist wants as the artist, and it's my job to kind of bring that together and make your vision reality. And so if it takes a couple extra notes on the script, okay, just make sure that you call it out, right? Don't hide it in the panel description. You know, I get letterer ... and then have, you know, the feedback. So I don't think it's necessarily bad that you put that description out. I would be mindful of, you know, maybe who those directions may be more appropriate for, because there could be some stuff visually that may be easier for the artist to handle than the letterer. But, you know, we can be kind of cool too sometimes.
So we have to start wrapping up, but so Todd, I want you to definitely answer, and then just take a second to talk about some of the stuff you're working on. And
Sure.
online.
In regards to receiving notes based on the lettering and maybe the tonality or even the color or the style of the lettering, for me, I have no problem taking direction. A lot of times with certain projects, I just get a script, I get dialogue, and it's up to me to come up with the tonality. For example, when something completely different, when I get scripts from Jim Valentino over at Shadowline, he is specific about where he wants the placement. He is specific about where he wants the caption and what color that caption should be and everything. So that makes my job really easy, though. But what else were we doing? We're wrapping up.
You're
okay.
wrapping up,
All right.
so
Go
what are
home
you
safe.
working on now?
Here we go. So I'm currently working on a very cool project for a Swedish metal band called Sabaton. Marvel artist Nick Varela and I have just wrapped up with some very cool pages for this, and so look for that. And that's all I can say on that, unfortunately. But also, if anyone would like, we've got a super secret little QRC that you come up here or catch me in the hall and scan, and I will show you some of the stuff that I'm doing. Super secret.
Yeah, definitely check those out. We got some samplers from Z-Rock Comics, from Todd's stuff that he's working on, and something that I'm working on too. We should have known that you would have been here. We could have got you something up in there.
Hey, no, that's okay. You guys can catch me with the Jinx World crew. I do a lot of work with them over at Dark Horse. Masterpiece 4 is on stands now by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maliv. It's a fun series. Come check it out.
Yeah, and right now we're wrapping up the Kickstarter for Tyler Kirkham's Final Boss number 4. There's about 1 week left.